Please welcome Doug Mays. And remember to mute your microphones. Thanks.
Well, good morning. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. Let me know if the volume is correct, or it's a pleasure to be here today. I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is you're going to be able to see my board as I paint, and the even better news, I guess, is you won't be able to see me because my other camera has decided it didn't want to show my face today. So in any event, you're going to see the most important stuff right here. So can somebody give me just unmute yourself and give me a thumbs up that you can hear me okay?
This is Perry, and I at first I thought you weren't loud enough, but I adjusted the volume on my device and now I can hear you clearly.
Okay, that's great. Okay, super. Thanks, Perry. Again, thank you very much for inviting me to this art group. This is the first one I've done for an art group in the United States. I've done a few in Canada, and I conduct my own for the last 5 or 6 months. But in any event, let me just give you a little background in what I'm all about with art. I always felt I was an artist from a very young age. I was always seemed to be drawing and sketching in my notebooks at school, much to the teacher's chagrin. My very first watercolor that I remember that had some notoriety with it was when I was in grade 5. I was age 10, and I lived in a small village next to where I live now, and it was only about 3,000 or 4,000 people. But my painting, my watercolor, was taken to one of the merchant's windows, and it sat in a merchant window for about a month. And I would walk by it or drive by it on my bike every day and see it there. And that was a real watershed event for me, to see that painting in the window, and it was getting some recognition. And as I said, it was really something that set me on my way, I think, to wanting to do more art. And so as Perry indicated earlier, I studied art not all the way through high school, but up till grade 11. And then I still did a lot of art on the side. And then after studying architecture at college, I took a lot of workshops, both in Canada and some in the United States, with notable instructors. In 1972 or 71, I graduated from college, but I then went to work and got a day job for 30 years. And I worked for the Steel Company of Canada, which at the time was the largest steel company in Canada. And I stayed with them for 30 years, retiring 2002 as a senior buyer. So you can see I was using my left brain for much of my job, and my right brain for my art. In 2000, prior to retiring, actually, I transitioned into teaching watercolors. Year 2000, I was asked if I'd like to teach at a local art club, and I did, and I did that for a few years. And then after retiring, I decided I would prefer to do full-day workshops as opposed to doing the nighttime 2 to 3 hour classes. And so it's been just a wonderful transition from the working world into to being a full-time artist and instructor. As Perry indicated, my workshops have taken me to Europe and to the US, and we actually winter for the last number of years in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, which of course is a hub for artists. I know it's very important to the US. I know the GI Bill allowed the veterans coming back from Europe, etc., to go down to San Miguel to further their studies in various art forms, art genre, and it's for those who have not been to San Miguel de Allende. If you get a chance one day to do it, I would take it in. And it's just full of energy and artists of all types throughout. I just want to talk a little bit about moving from my workshops, which where I go and would set up my my equipment and sometimes teach to groups of 30 or more, but it transitioning to this online has certainly been a bit of a struggle for me, because I'm not the strongest when it comes to computers and technology, and so do not feel intimidated by this, because every day I learn something new. It was a little rough at first. Just setting up the studio was some very difficult to get the right lighting, to get the easel in the right position, to buy equipment that would actually hold the camera, and so the last 5 months has been quite interesting in seeing how it is improving, and what you're seeing today is only the second time I've actually been using a flat table with my board and my holding tray next to it. So this is something I've been working towards for a few months now, and I feel that in spite of a couple little glitches along the way, I feel like I found the right combination of camera, lighting, and the presentation. So anyway, I'm happy that we were able to achieve that prior to this workshop today. As Perry indicated, in my bio, my style is a loose impressionistic. That's what I describe myself as. And I have been teaching basically novice to advanced watercolorists how to probably loosen up their style. I think all watercolors tend to start off with a very tight, realistic style, and I think that's natural, because we tend to want to learn how to mix the colors and to recreate an image that perhaps we see in a photograph or whatever, and that helps us to create that skill that we need. We gain the knowledge, we create the skill through repetition, and then after a few years, I know that a number of my friends have decided that they'd like to go to a slightly different style, perhaps a more expressive, looser style, and that's what I teach. So in any event, I'm not going to spend much more time about that particular aspect, but if I was to sum up the quickest way to become loose, I would say it's this guy right here. The 1.5 inch flat brush, which I use a lot. And then I have, I'll just talk about my materials a little bit. I have a 1 inch flat brush with a chisel end. It's a younger brother, a 1/2 inch with a chisel end. I have my mop brush, which I use. I have a number of mop brushes, but I like this one. It gives me some nice curvilinear shapes and nice calligraphy. And then I end up with my rigger or liner brush to finish off paintings that require just a little bit of calligraphy. So in any event, those are the brushes I'm going to be using today. I'm just going to get those out of the way. And I like to say that I don't work at watercolor, I play at watercolor. So we'll put that there. Now, these are some, I'm just going to go quickly through some of the demonstration paintings that I have done. Not all of them online, but this one I did a couple weeks ago to describe a maritime scene. And it's approaching, it was called Moonlight over St. John's in Newfoundland. This one I just did yesterday, an autumn scene. Um, and you can see the strong color that I like to bring into my paintings. And I also would like to point out that I like this strong contrast of tonal values. And I'm going to just really quickly put this up. This is my range of tonal values, and you may have seen this before somewhere. I use a range of 1 to 9. So 1 is white, 9 is black, and 5 is my mid-gray. So quite often I'll say to people during critiques, I'll say, gee, if that shape over there were about a 6 value, I think it would read better than perhaps what it is now. So then they can say, oh, he wants me right in here. Okay. So I find that using that range is really important. Here's another one I did of an old shed, and I call this one Dappled Light because I like the strong sunlight coming through and then the cast shadows. This is just a sunset painting I did a few weeks ago as well. This one was called Poppies and Pines, and I actually took 2 photographs and I collaged them together to create this composition. I like to create my own compositions, but I had a photograph of southern France with the poppy fields, and I had another photograph of northern Ontario with pine trees, and I felt, gee, I can show how we can collage 2 images together to come up with something. So that one I did a couple weeks ago. And there may be a little glare on this because it's got I'll just put it this way so you don't see the glare. This is the one I painted a number of years ago. I just called it Light Streams. This goes this way. I like doing florals as well, but you can see the looseness and the simplicity of the big shapes, etc. This is a local building that I have close to us. This is where the International Women's Institute was actually formed at this building, not too far from where we live. Here's another autumn scene that I created just about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. I can't exactly remember which workshop. And then the final one is just more of a European light scene that. Anyway, that'll give you an idea of sort of what my goal is today. So here I have my blank, not blank canvas, but blank 140-pound cold press paper. I like using Fabriano, Artistico, but Arches is very good. Winsor Newton is also very good. And but I use 140-pound because I do a lot of workshops, and I can buy this in Canada for something under $4 a sheet, a full sheet, whereas 300-pound paper would cost me probably 2.5, 3 times that. So I just go with this. Now I'm going to get some buckling as I proceed, but in any event. Once I dry the paper, and drying it is really important, I'm just going to put these. Moisture control is really key for the watercolorist. So does anybody have any question or concern at this point? Please let me know before I get started. I'm just is everybody okay, Perry or Casey or?
So far so good from my end, and I will remind everyone that if they have a question for you, they can type it in chat, and then I will field the questions and ask them as we go along.
Okay, that sounds good. I just want to make sure because it's so quiet here. I want to make sure that you're hearing me okay. So all right. So now my process. Now, I appreciate not everybody is a watercolorist. I know that you have artists of various mediums, acrylics, oils, pastels, and that's great. I adopted watercolor as being my my medium of choice a number of years ago. I have done oils, I've done acrylics. I still do acrylics actually, but I get the most pleasure out of watercolor, to be honest with you, because it's quick, it's immediate. I can be spontaneous with it, and you never exactly know where it's going to go. That's the other thing about watercolor. It sometimes is you see unexpected things happen with it. So now this particular composition, by the way, was from a photograph that one of your members, Laura, had sent me and said, Doug, if you'd like to use this, you're welcome to, and I appreciate that. It's a beautiful photograph of a road. I believe it's up in Wisconsin, and so we have a nice combination of warm yellow, orange, reddish tree leaves in the trees. We have a little bit of green peeking through, and then this road, which has this nice bluey purple feel to it, which gives me a nice contrast, especially if there's some purple in the road here. It'll be a complement to the yellow, perhaps, that could be dominating in the trees. My colors, I'm all mixed up. I think I sent you the color chip for that as well. My colors are Indian yellow, which is my warm yellow, and that's a Winsor Newton color. My rose doré, which is a neutral red, and rose doré could be close to, you may not have rose doré, I appreciate that, but it could be close to Windsor red or Scarlet Lake or even cadmium red. Something fairly neutral, not leaning to cool, not leaning to really warm, but in the middle. And then cobalt blue is my neutral blue too. It's not on the cool side, it's not on the warm side of the blues, it's in the middle. And then I've got my earth tone burnt sienna, which I use a lot of from time to time. So with those colors there, I can create secondary colors. I can create orange, purple, green, and I can also create some grays. So those are very versatile colors to start off with. So anyway, the three primaries and the earth tone. I like to start with my lightest value. So I'm going to start with the yellow, because the yellow allows me so much flexibility. I can go, I can add red to it to create the orange, or I can add blue to it to create the green. So both warm and cool. So anyway, so here we go. So I'm taking up, I'm going to call it a skim milk consistency. I think I sent you the 5 consistency lesson, which I always relate to the milk products. So I have 5 consistencies. I have skim milk, 2% homogenized buttermilk and butter. So the skim milk is going to be the most diluted, and the butter is going to be the most opaque. Okay, it's going to have a lot of pigment in it, a little bit of water. Skim milk, lots of water, a little bit of pigment. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top. I got lots of yellow to put in, so I'm blocking in my shapes right now. I'm just going to go back and pick up just a bit more pigment. I set my color palette out earlier, so it and I'm looking at my value sketch here as well to know where I want to put the yellows. I'm going to put yellow in the road too, because I want those light streams to come into the road. So there'll be cast shadows, but there will be some very strong warmth coming through as well. And there's going to be some tall grass on the side of the road, so I'm going to put that in as well. And as it goes back further, it gets quite, these lines get quite small and narrow. So essentially, it's just blocking in this loose wash stage. I'm going to take some burnt sienna, and I'm going to add some burnt sienna to the yellow, and I don't want to cover up all that nice yellow though, because it's important. Quite often I'll see artists will put a color down and then they put the second color over top of it, and it'll change it. Certainly it'll change it because it's transparent, so there's a glazing effect going on. But quite often they'll cover up that first color completely, and you've really defeated the purpose of the underpainting. And to me, underpaintings are just so important, because they're really the foundation for for a watercolor. So I'm just adding a little bit of burnt sienna to the edge of the road here a little bit. So the next color I'm going to put down, I'm actually going to put some red down as well, because I want to keep the first colors that I put down analogous. They're friends on the color wheel, so I want to put some strong red in here too. So this is my Rose Doré. Some people call it Rose d'Or, but I've been calling it Rose Doré. So it's got a bit of a French sound to it. So you can see how I'm quickly blocking in these shapes with, again, my 1.5 inch brush, which is a very versatile brush anyway. I've got some suggestions of red against the road here as well. So perhaps fallen leaves. There's a nice patch of red back in here too, I see. Now this road has got a little bit of a roller coaster ride to it as well, which is kind of a fun movement of shapes as well. So I'm just going to put this like that. Okay. I'm just cleaning out my brush now. Now I've got to be careful, because if I dip into my cobalt blue, I'm going to get some, perhaps if they mix with the yellows and the reds, I could get some mud showing up. And mud is something that watercolorists tend to always learn how to make first before they learn how to not make mud. So making mud is one of those things you've got to learn and then learn not to do them. So I'm just mixing up just a little thicker cobalt here. I want to make it a little more than skim milk, but I do want to start to suggest that this road back here, there are going to be a couple trees in front. I can cross right over them, actually. There's no need to, but I want to keep this road back here very narrow as it comes into the composition. So now I'm going to get a little green going there because I had yellow on the road. So, and then it makes this little bit of a dip right here, which is kind of fun to do. Now that yellow that's still coming through there, that's obviously to represent the warm sun hitting that part of the road. So, when I have a road coming into the painting like this, and I do a lot of country roads, I enjoy painting them. I always try to make them very wide in the foreground, the immediate foreground. So you can see where the road is actually leaving the paper. And this is about 20 inches. This paper is about 20 inches. So I'm in about 6 to 7 inch. Oh, sorry, no, back here. I'm in about 4 inches here, and the road leaves about an inch at the side here. So very wide, and it gets to a very narrow, goes into a very narrow, almost a carrot shape. And I do talk about carrot shapes a lot. Okay, I'm just going to put a little bit of blue here. So now I'm going to take some of my red and my rose doré. I was even debating to add another red here. And I'm just going to create some purple here. So I'm doing it by letting the colors mix on paper here. So I'm not going to cover up all that blue, but I do want to have a little bit of there. I'm going to mix up a little bit because I don't want it to be too warm of purple. Okay. And I don't want to do a lot of brush work because the one thing I don't want to do is lose the sparkle. And unfortunately, that's what happens in watercolor sometimes. There's so much brush work going on that people will get all those colors mixing together, and then they lose that sparkle and it creates some mud. So you got to be very careful that way too. I'm just going to bring this up just a little bit here because I want that nice little movement right there in the road. Yeah. So you can see the values are starting to get into about the 4 or 5 range of values. But remember with transparent watercolor that values will lighten as they dry. So I'm just gonna, some colors will go lighter up to 30%. So you have to compensate for that. And Edgar Whitney, who I referred to a lot because he was a wonderful instructor, and some of you may be familiar with some of his teachings. He has a few books out, but Whitney said, if the values look right when they're wet, then they're wrong. So you have to compensate for them to get lighter. Okay, so I think that's quite strong. I don't want to go any darker with that. I have my tissue handy here so that I can pick up some extra water that perhaps create a valley or something in the paper. So I just want to break this up just a little bit because I find it a little bit too perfect here. So I'm just trying to get a little more, interruption, I guess, in the shape. Okay. Now, I like what's happening there. So I'm going to take my blue now and I'm going to create some green up in here because this will be a nice contrast between the warm, perhaps, of the grass. So I'm just going to do a little, it's slightly darker value in here. So I'm doing a little bit of negative painting in some ways. By doing the darks, I'm creating some positive shapes here too. So, yeah. And there'll be some more positive shapes showing up as well, up in the trees, right up in here as well. So. I'm actually getting a little bit of gray working here, which I'm okay with. That's fine, but I'm just going to just put a little bit of stuff in here too. So what I'm doing, again, is with this negative painting, I'm creating these beautiful positive shapes that just want to jump forward. So I'm just going to mute the corners here a little bit too, with some suggestion of a little bit of grass perhaps growing here. I'll use this probably for a good portion of the overall process. At some point, I want to get into some darker suggestions, but I'm just going to come up here because there's a little bit of an opening right up in here um, in the trees. And I'm going to take some of my burnt sienna now because I want to gray that out. And I can create some decent grays with cobalt and burnt sienna. So, okay, it's still very wet here, so I'm okay with that. I'm just going to come back with a little bit of more cobalt there. I just want to cool that off a little bit because I'm always working on the basis that warms advance and cools recede. Yeah, I always remember that. So, and this is the furthest spot in the paper. This is the foreground is the closest to the viewer. So back here is going to be a furthest away. So I want to make sure that that's nice and cool back there. Okay, I was sitting down before, but now I'm going to stand for a bit because I can see my composition developing. I keep referring to my laptop here too, because my laptop sort of pushes the image away a little bit, so I can read it a little better. Okay. Now it's still very damp here. The paper is quite damp, so I'm just going to mix some gray right in here too. So cobalt and burnt sienna. So you can see that that's a cool gray. I can warm it up just a little bit. So that's fairly thick. That's almost homogenized to buttermilk consistency. And I'll use that to create some darker values as well, maybe back in here as well. I'm going to break that up a little bit in here too. I just find that this road, I want this road to feel like a country road. So I like the grass being scraggly and not too perfect. It's not like a city road, you know, where you got concrete sidewalks and curbs, etc. Okay, and then I'm going to bring this up here like this, create another little bit of a movement in that road right in here too. Okay. Now I got to make sure I don't outline my shapes. That's the other thing. So I got to be careful. Right now, you see, that looks like I've outlined it, and I don't want that, because if you start outlining shapes, then you really have to try and outline all of them. And that is a specific style that a lot of people like. They like to take shapes and outline them. And I'm okay with that. So just going to come down here with a little bit of that gray as well. Okay. Now, let me see, where do I want to go? I want to pick up some more red. I want to really make this this area here sing with some red. So I'm going to come up in here too. So again, all these shapes are analogous. You got red, you got orange, and you got yellow. So they're friends on the color wheel, which mean that if you use just those, you're not going to get mud. You're going to get just a nice movement of temperature, that's all, and value. But it's when you start pulling other colors from the other side of the color wheel together with those, that's when you could get yourself into some mud trouble. So anyway, I'm going to just put a little bit down in here too, just to give it a little bit of excitement. And I'm going to bring some of that red over in here too. Having done the value sketch in advance, that's sort of my rehearsal, you see. It's helpful, very helpful for me, because I know where I want to have the strongest light. in the paper, and it's these two yellow patches here, because I see it in my, again, in my value sketch. So I'm a big proponent of people doing value sketches in advance, because you can change your composition. You may say that the photograph has some flaws to it, and it may have some items that just don't look right. Well, do it with a little bit of, this is just a little postcard size pencil sketch with values in it, and I think you'll probably save a lot of paper and pigment by doing these, because you can be very forthright with your brushwork, very assertive with your brushwork if you've done these. Okay. Now I've got this very strong light here, which I don't really want it that strong, so I'm going to come back with some yellow, and I'm just going to just put some, put some in here too, at the base of some of these. Okay. Now, to help me push the image back, you see in a lot of artist studios how they stand back from their easel maybe 10, 20 feet. And they do that for a reason, obviously. They want to see the image, the gestalt of the image. They want to see the whole thing and how it's developing. And does it have balance? Does it have movement, harmony? And for me, I can't get back any further here. So what I'm doing is just squinting. And I know the downside of squinting is you get crow's feet perhaps over a period of time, but squinting allows me to eliminate, and so that all I see are shapes and values, not so much the detail, okay, of, so shapes and values are really important to me, because at the end of the day, it's the pattern that is what I'm focused on, not so much the literal shapes of things, okay, or the literal aspect of all these shapes, whether it's grass or the road or whatever. Yeah, I just want to see shapes and values. Okay, so it's very wet right now. So as a watercolorist, I have to be concerned about having it too wet at times. So I've got to dry it up. I'm just going to interrupt it right here a little bit, so that yeah, with a little Kleenex. So now I'm going to turn on my hair dryer, and the one thing about the hair dryer is that you won't hear it. You shouldn't hear it. It'll go quiet, but I won't be talking. I won't be talking at all when I have it on. So it'll be about 30 seconds or more, maybe a minute. Okay, so I appreciate it went a little longer than a minute, but I want to make certain that the pigment has had an opportunity to sink in to the paper. Quite often, artists will go in too soon. The paper is still quite damp. The pigment hasn't, those first layers haven't got into it deep enough. And they'll maybe perhaps put another consistency of skim milk, which is again very diluted. And what happens is they'll get blossoms or cauliflowers showing up. I'm sure you've experienced this because we all go through it. So it's important that we dry it to a point that if I put now a thicker consistency, such as homogenize on here, it could be, then the colors could be a little darker. It's not going to create those blossoms, and that's another thing that we as artists have to be concerned about. So, okay, I'm just cleaning my brush out again, and then deciding where I want to go with it. And I'm going to take I could take this gray, again, this burnt sienna cobalt mixture, and I just want to ensure I enhance this road just a little bit so that I can get this movement in the road. So, yeah. And I'm going to go just a little darker on the vertical part of the background, okay? So that we have, this road is still going to get quite dark in some ways, but with cast shadow. That's what all I was trying to do here, is to enhance that just a little bit. A little bit of negative painting in here, okay. And I got that hump in the road there. There's going to be actually the middle of the road, being a country road, they tend to have, I'm going to go a little bit more burnt sienna. They tend to have a rut in sort of in the middle of the road. So I'm just going to suggest that that rut like that. I'm going to work on that a little bit as we get further back here, but okay. And here's a little, now I've moved to my mop brush here a little bit because I want to start to define some of the mid to dark values in the road as well. So, so you're starting to see me moving from sort of very abstract in the loose wash stage now to becoming more representational. So this is what I now refer to as the definition stage. If the first blocking in was purely more in the abstract, loose wash stage is more abstract. Now I'm getting into the definition where I'm actually moving from abstract to representational art. So, okay. And I'm just going to come in and start to identify some stronger negative space here. Again, it's sort of a gray, but I am relying on the underpainting to create different colors as well, because remember with transparent watercolors, whatever we put over on the second layer of color is going to be influenced by what's underneath too. So yeah, just gonna, I got some tall grass here, remember. I want to save that tall grass along the edge. So I'm just changing the texture as well as I go. So I don't want to have all hard edges showing up. So yeah. So I've got the almost a staccato effect here. You can see light, dark, light, dark, light. You see that effect coming across? It's quite often I'll look for staccato in my pattern. Just going to come in here with a little bit more dark right in here too. This is probably is going to get another strong suggestion of cast shadow, but for now, we'll just put that in. I got to look back at my value sketch here. I think I'm going to break it right in here so that we have some low hanging boughs of trees, branches of trees that are just heavy with leaves at this point in time. And I'll just do a little bit of negative here to break that up and give it a little bit of depth too. So every time I put a darker value in, you see, I'm creating more depth as well, which is interesting to do that. I will be showing some trunks of trees as well as I go, dark near the end, some very strong darks of trunks of trees. So, okay. I'm going to come back and I'm going to hit it with some red over here because you see I've got some strong red here, but I want to echo that red in some ways over here. So we'll just splash in a little bit right in here as well. Maybe a little bit in this corner too would be fun, so that it brings unity to the painting when you can introduce those colors through. Now I have a scraper here. It's just like a plastic credit card of sorts. Now it's too dry. But I like to scrape out shapes as well. Maybe some grass, etc. So yeah, that got a little bit too dry there. So if I glaze over that, I have an opportunity of scraping out maybe a few little highlights, ruts in the road, if you will. I think that would be kind of an interesting thing to do as well. Okay, let me come back with a little bit of cobalt here. This is again more of a homogenized mixture here, and I'm just going to create this broken edge here. I like to what I refer to as interrupt my shapes, okay, so that I don't like to see, here I'll put a few ruts in the road. That'll remind me anyway to put more in later as it dries. Now, I'm going to take some of my burnt sienna now in my brush, not the gray, but burnt sienna, and I'm actually going to throw in some warmer ruts right in the foreground. Again, because I know that warms advance and cools recede. So I want to reinforce the illusion of depth when I can. And I do it with temperature. So, okay. So I'm just looking at my screen here and seeing, now what I've noticed, and this happens a lot, is when you have a shape that let's say goes from the foreground to the background, you really have to ensure that it's bigger here and small there. And what I noticed is that there's very, very little difference in the width or the height of this dark edge of the road between here and here. So I have to do something about it. I can either make this smaller or I make this bigger. Well, it's much easier for me to make it bigger. So I'm going in to mix up some of this gray again. Maybe just lean a little bit to the cobalt so I can get a cool gray. And I'm just going to make this a little bigger here, you see. And that helps to reinforce the illusion of depth. And as I go back further, it'll get thinner. So think carrot shapes all the time. I always think carrot shapes. And I'll put some darks up in here too. Yeah. And maybe I can even scrape out. I'm not sure if this is still, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that works. Okay, it's still wet enough that I could scrape out a little bit. And okay. Good. Okay. That's much stronger. Yeah, I can even go a little bit higher right here. Okay. That's much better. Okay. And same thing holds true in the immediate foreground. These dark shapes perhaps are going to be a little wider, you see right in here, than they are, and they get gradually smaller as they go back here. So anyway, yeah, okay, good. Okay, we're moving ahead very nicely here. It's 11:04, so I'm coming up to, I think it's about 40 minutes thereabouts. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm getting very close to the end here. But I do want to put in some very strong number 9, 8 and 9 values for the trees. Okay, the trunks of the trees, etc. I just probably will want to go for a little bit of more stuff down in here too. But I like the way the dappled light is coming through here. I don't want to lose that. That's really strong. But a lot of this is going to be just cast shadow here. So just give me a chance to dry this a bit more. Then I'm going to mix up my probably about a homogenize to buttermilk consistency of number 9 value for the trunks of the trees. And then we're getting really close to the end. I may want to glaze over the cast shadow. Sorry. I may want to glaze over the cast shadow of the road one more time as well. Okay, it's still damp, but I think it's okay to go in and add some darker value. I've mixed up some black here, and I actually cheated, folks. I've actually used some of my cool red and my cool blue. to create number 9 value, because cobalt isn't really going to give me a full number 9, and I do want it for some of these trees here. So now you may have alizarin crimson. I use carmine, but you may have alizarin crimson, and you may have phthalo blue as your cool blue. I use Prussian blue for my cool blue. Again, because I find they're just less intense than phthalo blue and alizarin. So anyway, now I'm going to come in and start to suggest some trees here. Let me see. Have one over in here too. I'm going to make a big poppet tree coming through here. You notice how I've interrupted the shape because I want the feeling that there's foliage all the way around. That's going to be important too. So I'm also conscious of where I'm having these shapes land so that they're not perfectly situated. You know, I'll even put a little, maybe a baby here coming through. And I'll move this one over a little bit. And you notice how they seem to be popping through in the dark parts of the foliage, not the light parts, because the darkest parts are sort of in the interior of the trees anyway. So that's where you're going to see the branches and the trunks popping through. So yeah, just and then as I get further away, obviously the things get much thinner, and so this mop brush is good for that because it creates that nice calligraphy that is important. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to create a very strong edge for this road here, because I just found it was getting lost. You know, at some point you have a horizontal shape becoming a vertical shape. And so you have to perhaps do something slightly different to express that. Yeah, we just.
Doug, this is Perry. I want to say
Yes.
we really appreciate you rushing through your demonstration, but don't feel like you have to rush.
Okay.
Take your
Okay.
time.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You know, I always say some of the best watercolors are those that are painted quickly, because we can use fewer brush strokes. You can express what you want to express. You can tell the story, I always say, with as few brush strokes as possible. So no, that's fine. I'm just going to pick away at where I think it needs it. Now I've got I got a couple of foreground trees here that I want to bring in, and I said they were going to be dark anyway. So I think there's one right about here. So I'm going to put it in right there on this side. And that helps to give me a little bit of what I call edge block or visual speed bump to keep the viewer's eye into the composition. So, and I'm going to put another one just about here too. So just to, yeah. And I'm always conscious of where trees land on the paper, both vertically and horizontally, because I want that nice variety. So anyway, thanks for that comment, Perry. I appreciate knowing you know, how I'm doing here, because I know you had in an earlier one had indicated that you were expecting a certain time period. So I'm just going to put a few little, go with some burnt sienna here. I'm just going to warm up a few, you know, maybe a little bit of grass in the peak on that of the road here. I think that's working. Okay. I'm going to also take my mop brush. It's dry, thirsty. I'm adding a little bit of more of a buttermilk consistency. And I'm just going to do a little splatter in the immediate foreground too, because I always find that that little bit of extra texture sort of adds a little something to the composition. Don't want to take it back too far, but okay. You know, that value in the road is pretty good. But now that I've splattered, now I've got to let that sit and dry before I go over the cast shadow one more time. I'm going to do one other thing though. I'm going to take my 1/2-inch brush and I'm just going to lift out a little bit of value here, right about here, because I want this part of the road to have just a little bit more importance. And maybe I'll go in here too, because I want to accentuate that dappled light a bit more right in here. So with watercolor, there are certain colors, of course, that will lift much easier than others. Some of them that are strong staining colors, like the phthalos and lizard crimson, they are, oops, I'm sorry, I keep hitting my hat on that. But I like that dappled light coming through as well. And when I critique people's work, and that's the other important part of my workshops as well. I do a critique at the end of each day, and many times I'll critique them and say, gee, you know, I think this shape would be better if you lifted out a little bit of value, or softened an edge. Maybe the hard edges are just too dominant. So, yeah. I'm just, this is going to read a little differently too as I put a mat over it, yeah, which I always do at the end. So, okay, I'm just going to take a little bit more number 9 value. Now this is carmine and Prussian, obviously, are purple, but they'll create a nice dark value close to number 9. And if you want to neutralize that purple, just add a little burnt sienna to it, and you'll get some really nice strong shapes coming through. So I'm just going to add a little bit of dark in here too to create maybe some darkness for the side of the road. Yeah, we'll just maybe put another, bring that up just a bit. Got to make it look like these trees are going to be able to support the weight. So you can't have it too spindly at the bottom and then too big at the top. So, yeah. I'm just gonna take a little bit of that out right there. So just lifting out that little bit of those little shapes there, I think have helped to give that, again, that strong feeling that the light is coming through or is trying to come through these trees that are just full of leaves. But I'm going to dry this because I want to glaze over the cast shadow just one more time. I really feel I can go to about a 7 value here with a violet even, not unlike the photograph that Laura had sent. There's some really strong violets, and it's about a 7 value in parts of these, which I really like. So I'm just going to dry it again. when you're testing your paper to see how dry it is, use the back of your hand. And if it feels warm, it's dry. And if it still feels cool, then it's still too damp, probably. So, so I'm going to mix up, again, more cobalt, and I'll go with rose doré to create this violet. And if you don't get the tonal value, even when you're glazing, if you don't get the tonal value exactly dead on of what you wanted, dry the paper and hit it again, and it'll take it a little darker again. So yeah, I'm just going to come up here, right in here. I think this will be a nice spot to yeah, to start those really dark cast shadows in here too, across the road. I want a few streams coming through as well, but what these cast shadows do is they help to connect the left and the right side. I always feel when you have these dark shapes, whether they're the trees or the shadows in the tall weeds or grass, these cast shadows come over and they start to connect with the darks on this side, and I feel it helps to complete the image quite nicely, so that we don't have little islands showing up throughout the paper. So I'm just going to come out, maybe yep, just a little bit more, a little more in here. It's going to be even stronger cast shadow right here, because not only are the distant higher trees creating the cast shadow, but these weeds here are also creating a shadow. So they'll probably just be a little darker right in here as well. And it's something you don't necessarily consciously see. I just try to imagine being there and how it would look. I like putting cast shadows right at the very bottom of my paper as well. And I do that consciously because I don't want number one value or white leaving the paper. Because what happens is those little white shapes, or diamonds as I call them, sometimes will connect with the white matting that you put on, and it becomes an optical problem. So yeah, just let me just, I'll put a few little dark ruts in the road over here too. Yeah. Okay, I think that's better. Now, I can, if push came to shove, now that it's damp, I can come in and I can suggest a few little highlights with these converging ruts. Okay, see how they converge and go back into the painting. So a little bit of a, just a credit card. Sometimes when we used to stop at hotels, they'd give you a key card. I would always keep those key cards because they make great little scrapers for scraping. Okay. Just see something. You always look back at it as it dries and try to say, let's see, how can I'm just going to interrupt this road right about there too. I thought it was just a little bit too perfect right there. So Okay. All right. Now I can take my rigger. I've got this number 9 value working here. I'm just going to add a little burnt sienna to it to neutralize the purple, and just add just a few little smaller branches, perhaps peeking through at different intervals. And we'll have another one over here too. I'm going to reach over into my bag of other brushes here. And here I have an old toothbrush, which I'd like to keep handy so that I can mix up just a little bit of color, perhaps, and put a little bit of, oops, didn't want that guy. Just a little splatter, perhaps, in some of the trees as well, to create a little bit of shape, splatter shape, which could read as individual leaves. There could be a little bit on the road here too, so I'll just put a little bit on the side where it's the lightest part of the road, and put a little over in here too. I don't usually put too much in the background. I usually devote it more to the foreground shape anyway. So anyway, I think we're there. Hope we haven't lost anybody or too many people, but
Oh, I think it's very interesting and impressive how much you can do in such a short period of time.
well, I've been at it for 20 years, plus teaching. So the process is pretty much the same, regardless whether I do a landscape, a seascape, a streetscape, a floral. It's really the same process, and I guess we get faster as we go. We can be more, as I said, more assertive and forthright with our brush. And I always, I think Edgar Whitney said it too. He said, less is more. And I know we've heard that several times since, but he may have been one of the first ones to say in watercolor, less is more. But the mood is always important. I always say, well, what mood are you trying to express today? And find out what that mood is. To me, the mood was I want a nice, warm, sunny autumn day filled with light. And so if you want light, you've got to have shadows. And you have to, if you want light values, you've got to have dark values, because it's the darks that make the lights, and it's the lights that make the darks. And it's the warms that make the cools, etc. So all of those things are really important. Now, I could have had a guy walking down the road here with a dog, which I've done before, but it's too late now. But
Well, it's a beautiful image you've created. Can
well,
you
thank
take
you.
a moment and say how often your workshops are offered online and how people can find them?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that, and thank you for that. My website is called Arrows in the Quiver Gallery Studio. I've had that name for quite a number of years, and I'll give you a little history on that name. Arrows in the Quiver. A few years ago, I had managed to sell 2 or 3 of my wife's, which I found out later were my wife's favorites. And she was a little upset with me, and she said, you keep selling those ones that I like. And I said to her, well, dear, don't worry, I have more arrows in the quiver. And after that, I said, gee, that would make a good name for my gallery, studio gallery. So that's how it came about. Anyway, www.arrowsinthequiver.com, or if you Google my name, you'll get my website anyway. I do offer mostly weekly workshops, although I'm doing you've got a Thanksgiving coming up, so I'm not going to do one that week, but because I do get a few from both the East Coast and the West Coast of the U.S. Taking my workshops, which I'm happy. And a lot of these people, in fact, I've met down in San Miguel de Allende, and they've become good friends. So, if you go on my website, or if you would like to send me an email, please do, and I can put you on the mailing list. And then I do not charge. I charge a very nominal fee because I tend to get 30 to 40 people take my workshops. I charge $15 Canadian, which works out to roughly $11.25 US. And what you get is about an hour and a half, an hour and a quarter to an hour and a half workshop. But you get deliverables before that. You get a lesson. You get a photo reference, you get a value sketch, you get my palette, what I'm going to be using. So I try to feed everyone the information in advance. So, because some people like to maybe sketch it out and so that they can follow along with me too. But each week is different. I'm not sure what I'm doing. My next one is October 22nd. It's a week today. And I took this week off because I was doing the one for the Tellico art group. So that's, but next week I'll be back at my own. So if you like this, and I appreciate that we have some oil and acrylic painters here, and I hope they enjoyed it. My workshops do tend to talk a lot about composition, the design elements, principles of design, which all apply to all visual mediums, really, not just watercolor. They apply to all of them. And as I say, Edgar Whitney was a guy that I was really strongly influenced by his teachings, and I have a number of his books. And of course, John Singer Sargent is one of my favorite watercolorists, along with a Spaniard, Joaquin Sorolla. I love his work as well. So if anybody gets a chance to see some of their work, I think you'll really like the compositions they did as well.
Now, before I give you one final thank you, Doug, there was a technical question, which is, can you tell us how you wetted the paper at the start before you began the seminar?
Did I wet the paper at the beginning?
Yeah, how did you do that? How long did you get it wet?
Oh, if I wet the white paper, and I can't remember if I did in this one, or if I just went in with the yellows. But usually if I'm doing a wet and wet, for instance, either one side wet or both sides wet, it probably would take, maybe 5 to 10 minutes for it to get to maybe the right amount of moisture that I can go and start to put in my color. But it really depends. It's a hard one to say because every environment is slightly different. And I usually wait till the sheen, the strong sheen is off the paper. And then I can get into it and allow the colors to go in and sink into the paper.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're
On
welcome.
behalf of everyone watching, I want to thank you so much for the excellent presentation. I think your art is beautiful, and you definitely succeeded in suggesting a warm, inviting road in Wisconsin here in your composition and execution. So congratulations on successfully doing it, and thank you so much for rushing your demonstration and having it fit for our needs.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank your art group for inviting me. It was, I know it was by chance that Laura had traveled on one of my European workshops, and that's how I got to know Laura. And then, of course, Laura has was kind enough to pass my name on to everybody. And so thank you very much for being, so kind to me as well, inviting me. I appreciate it, to all of the group, and good luck with watercolors. And as I always say, keep the brushes wet.
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
So
you, everybody.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'll send you the final image by email.
Fantastic. We'll get it posted on our website.
All the best. Take care. And
Excellent.
stay safe, everyone.
Exactly. Everyone stay safe. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.